Well, hello there, and welcome back to my show, Father Roderick Talks Star Wars. And boy, do we have some Star Wars to talk about this week. Of course, it's the week of the premiere of Disney Plus in a lot of countries, and thereby also the beginning of the first television series, the live-action television series about The Mandalorian. Now, if you haven't seen that series or the first episode yet, please don't watch this episode because it's completely filled with spoilers. I'm going to go minute by minute, frame by frame through the first chapter of this TV series, and we'll be discussing everything that happens, including the ending of this first episode. And if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. I've got my notes right here on my phone. I watched the episode 3 times, and I want to give you all my thoughts. And of course, I'm going to forget about things. I'm going to skip some of the Easter eggs in there. So I'm counting on you to let me know in the comments what you noticed in this first chapter of The Mandalorian. By the way, I really like that they talk about chapters and not episodes, because chapters feels much more like, chapters in a storybook. And after all, Star Wars is a fairy tale. And in this first episode, there are actually a lot of tropes, you could say, things that we know from the world of fairy tales, also from the world of mythology. And in addition to all the Easter eggs that I'll try to find, I will also expand on those elements which I think are classic Star Wars and also hint at developments later on in the series. But let me start with that first intro with all these, blue, red, what's the other color? White, kind of grayish chrome Star Wars characters. I love that intro. And maybe that's going to be the new intro instead of, we used to have the Fox fanfare, and then they did this kind of chopped up Star Wars intro or Lucasfilm intro that I didn't care for that much. Now we've got this. I like it. I like it so far. But it's very mysterious. It's very silent. That's kind of the first thing that struck me. I was expecting like a bombastic symphonic score, and all we get is this bleep, 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 and it makes you immediately curious. It's really good storytelling. It's like, what's this sound? And then it's revealed in the first shot. It's a hand that holds like a tracker or something like that, like a radar device, and it's clearly the Mandalorian. What I like here is that this is classic cinema. This is the classic way to reveal your hero. You don't show him right away. You first show some details. You show a hand, a glove, a little device. Then you show him from the back and you see where he's going. You position him in the landscape. It's this kind of very wintry, barren situation. There is some snow in the air. By the way, all this is digital and it looks fantastic. And that is true for the entire episode. There is just so much quality in the way they did these digital sets. I'm very, very impressed. So we see the Mandalorian from the back, and he's walking towards this primitive settlement. The first thing I noticed was there are some moisture evaporators there. At least they look like moisture evaporators, like the ones we saw on Tatooine, but normally moisture evaporators are there to extract the moisture, the water from the air on planets or in regions where there's not much water there. However, we soon discovered that this entire settlement is built on ice. So could that mean that they made a mistake? Or is the water, or what we think is water underneath the ice, actually not water? It may be some poisonous substance that they can't really transform into the water that humans need to live, and supposedly also all other creatures in the universe. So I don't know if they have an explanation or if this was just a prop they put there to make it look Star Wars. But a moisture evaporator when there's snow in the air doesn't really make much sense. But anyway, it's a little detail. Then we, of course, see the inside of this, what looks to be a saloon or a tavern or a cantina. Definitely this first scene wants to remind us of the cantina scene in A New Hope. And we see a blue alien that is being attacked, it's being menaced. They're probably going to process him into something edible, or I don't know. Apparently he's valuable. And another thing that I noticed was that they speak Huttese here. But it's Huttese with a very strong American accent. I'm not sure if that's on purpose or if this is just, some actors that don't know how to speak Huttese properly, but maybe they just need a Hutt as a language coach next time. Anyway, you see these guys attacking this this alien, and then the door opens, and it's again this classic Western reveal of the hero, this cowboy standing in silhouette against the background, and you immediately also got the music that sounds like a Western, and this continues throughout the episode. They definitely deliberately wanted this to feel like an old Wild West classic movie. So the Mandalorian enters. I love the way they did the aliens, by the way. The masks, it's all very high quality, and as I said, very reminiscent of the Cantina scene in A New Hope. So you've got this immediate connection to what you see. This, right from the get-go, feels like Star Wars, and that, of course, is very important. You don't want to alienate people by showing an environment that is too different from what we already know. This series speaks the language of Star Wars, the visual language of Star Wars, and also, and I'll get back to that, the audio language of Star Wars. And then there is just silence, no more music. They talk to him, he doesn't answer. You see just the mask, and he's very stoic. I think they deliberately do that to create a little bit of mystery around this newcomer, this cowboy or wherever he's from. And then you've got another scene that refers to the Cantina in A New Hope. You remember when Luke is kind of squeezed in between these two aliens that are menacing him, and it takes Obi-Wan to rescue him? Well, almost the same scene here. The Mandalorian is trapped between two guys, and they are looking at his armor. And then there's this question, is that, this Beskar steel? That is a very kind of obscure reference to something that only the diehard fans probably know about, but this is apparently the steel that Mandalorian armor is normally made of. And they mention this because it's coming back later in the episode, and I think this is part of an important piece of the backstory of the Mandalorians, and maybe also of this particular Mandalorian. So they apparently the steel is valuable, so they're kind of scraping it off, and they're like, maybe we can, get more money if we capture this guy than the blue alien there. And the fight ensues. You've got this scene where the alien is cut in two by the door. That happens, by the way, off screen, thankfully. It's kind of like an upgrade of the scene in the Cantina in A New Hope, where there's just an arm that gets chopped off. Here it's like the entire upper body that gets spliced off. But, kind of part of Star Wars fights. There are always limbs that are cut off. It's part of the tropes of Star Wars. The fight is just a fight. It's well executed. It's not too fancy in terms of choreography, but it does the job. And then, of course, the blue alien thinks that he's rescued, and he's very grateful. Offers some credits to our hero, but he doesn't really care that much for the money because he's got a bounty puck. I love that concept, by the way. I'm not sure if that comes from existing comics or anything, but I love the fact that they just walk around with these pucks. They place it, and then they compare the hologram with the person that they're chasing, and if it's a match, then of course they know they have their asset. By the way, during the fight, you see, or right after the fight, you see the people in the Cantina react like, well, okay. So they're just like in A New Hope, they're very used to seeing violence in these bars. The blue alien, by the way, is another little cameo of someone that especially an American audience would be familiar with. This is Horatio Sands, known from his participation in Saturday Night Live. And he plays a mithril. That's the name of the blue alien species. It's the first time that we get introduced to this particular alien species. And And then the title appears, and the music again reminds us you're watching a Western in space. A little bit, I don't know, I still have to get used to it a little bit. I expected the music to be much more, higher quality, and it's very muted, very much in the background. Even the more symphonic stuff that comes later, I don't know. It's, for me, the weakest element of this new series. We then get introduced to the Ferryman, and this is another classic mythological trope. It's passage, literally. They have to go from one place, the start of the story, the initial situation, to the next destination. But that is not always as easy as it sounds. And of course, you first have to pay a price in order to get to the next level, in a way. This character, this ferryman, which is actually a real ferryman in a lot of the mythological stories, going back and forth between the underworld, and this life, you had to pay him. This ferryman is a gatekeeper. And gatekeepers are also almost always part of the Star Wars narrative. George Lucas really looked at all these old myths and what these stories had in common, and the gatekeeper is always there. Think of Darth Maul in The Phantom Menace, when the two Jedi want to take Anakin away from his mom and give him a proper education as this young Padawan. Darth Maul suddenly appears and tries to block them, and it takes a fight in order for them to escape. So that's the gatekeeper here. In this case, the ferryman just, needs a little bit of money. He calls a cab, basically, and the Mandalorian refuses. No droid. So there's clearly a backstory there between the Mandalorian and maybe droids in the past that didn't really function that well. I'm pretty sure that we'll get back to that later on in one of the future episodes, and we'll hear why he has such a I don't know, hatred for droids. He then calls another. By the way, this is kind of like a self-driving car. It's driven by an R2 unit. I love that. I think it's the first time that we see a Landspeeder actually being piloted by an R2 unit. And then there's a real cab driver arriving in a very beaten up Landspeeder, and it's again another comedian, Brian Posehn. He's a massive Star Wars fan in real life, so he probably requested to be in this series. And then he talks about the Ravanax. We at first don't know what he's talking about, but we soon learn that that's actually a monster that lurks underneath the surface of this planet. And apparently that monster gets attracted by the garbage that the pilots dump. So maybe this is something like the monster in the trash compactor. These monsters that love to eat trash to stay alive. Then we get the reveal of the ship of the Mandalorian, and to us it's like, wow, that's an awesome ship. It's got this metal outside, reminiscent of the World War II bombers and everything. I thought it looked amazing. The front even looks a bit like a Mandalorian helmet. I really dig the design, but apparently in the world of Star Wars, it's a hunk of junk. It's really an awful ship, because the blue alien offers to get a proper ship, and he would even pay for it just to make his abduction more nicer, more pleasant. The monster that was talked about earlier then, gets attracted and awakens and approaches. He first eats the Landspeeder, which I thought was another, nice little. You kind of see it coming. You see the Landspeeder driving away in the distance. And you're like, okay, the camera is lingering a little bit too much. It's like, okay, yeah. we kind of knew that was going to happen. And then the monster, of course, approaches the ship. Another gatekeeper, much more dangerous, of course, than the ferryman. And also a gatekeeper that has to be beaten by the hero. And so you got this big action scene. The first one, I love the effects. I love the monster. It looks very realistic. Well, realistic. There's nothing in real life that corresponds to this monster, but I like the fact that he tries to hold on to the ship. By the way, the engine kind of powers down again. You hear the exact sound that the Millennium Falcon makes when it's not starting, you know, and Leia's like, should I go out and push? Almost sounds a bit sacrilegious. You know, that is the sound that belongs to the Falcon. And here you got that whip, 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 whip. It's like, that was a Falcon sound, you know. Anyway, but it feels Star Wars. So you get the Mandalorian kind of zapping the alien monster, that then releases the ship, and everything is all and well. Notice some lens flares there for the first time also in the scene. I'm not sure if that's J.J. Abrams' influence, visual influence. And then you get this classic flyby in space. The position of the planet, the way the ship flies by is so recognizable. You immediately see this is not Firefly or Star Trek. This is a Star Wars flyby. I don't know what it is. You do have the sound of the engine that it sounds very much the same like the engine of Amidala's ship in The Phantom Menace when it first approaches, I think it's Naboo. So again, they use sounds that we've heard before so that we recognize the Star Wars sound. I love the way the cockpit, the interior of the cockpit was lit. That too, even the lighting is reminiscent of what we've seen in other Star Wars movies. Then you get the funny toilet scene, and he goes down to, I don't know, take a leak, and he discovers that the toilet is very bizarre. And if you look closely, you see some other constructions there for very strange shaped aliens, and if they need to pee, you can't have a human toilet. And that made me think of a very old cartoon in Mad Magazine. When A New Hope came out, Mad Magazine did a spoof, like they usually did that. You had like a 5 or 6 page cartoon, a comic where they include all sorts of jokes. And there was also a separate series of funnies in the same Mad Magazine. In one you see Luke Skywalker, who is at the Cantina, and he asks the bartender, hey, I gotta go to the toilet, where is it? And then he says, that way. And then he descends into the basement, and then the toilet is literally, there is no human toilet there. It's all these weird tubes and holes in the ground, and Luke is like, okay. So I don't know if this is deliberate, but it really made me think of that very old cartoon. And well, since Jon Favreau and Filoni are both, you know, huge Star Wars fans, it wouldn't surprise me that they actually have seen this cartoon and wanted to reference it here. We also then discover, what I really liked, is why these slabs of carbonite look the way they do in The Empire Strikes Back. It makes for such easy browsing between all your assets that you've captured as a bounty hunter. And then, of course, there was this hilarious joke, totally unexpected for me, where there's a reference to Life Day. Now, Life Day is this notorious day that was the centerpiece in the classic Christmas celebration episode, or the holiday episode, which is, you know, unfortunately not on Disney Plus yet. Still hoping that one day we will see a restored version. And Life Day there was explained to be a Wookiee holiday celebrated by the inhabitants of Kashyyyk every 3 years. So does this mean that this blue alien is married to a Wookiee? I don't know. He wants to be back with the family for Life Day. Plus, he makes it sound as if it's like Christmas. And if it's a yearly thing, not this year, but, you know, it's actually a celebration only once every 3 years. But maybe around this time, Life Day has been spreading around the galaxy because, you know, it's commercially interesting to celebrate it every year. Who knows? doesn't matter, but I loved this reference, this obscure reference to the holiday special. Let's see, after he's discovered the other prisoners or the abductees by the Mandalorian, he too is encased in carbonite and then brought to another planet. And this is the first time that we hear a symphonic piece of music that sounds a bit like the soundtrack of The Force Awakens. This sounds a bit like Kylo Ren's theme. It's probably not deliberate, but I was like, hey, that sounds familiar. I couldn't really pinpoint it, and then someone in the comments in my previous video said, that's a Kylo Ren-like theme. One of the only themes that I recognized in this first episode. Maybe the music will get better over time. This next planet looks a bit like Iceland. We see this village. That's a practical set, you could tell. Looks very cool. And then we get introduced to another cantina, even bigger than the first one that we saw. Even the cinematography here is like the way it was filmed in A New Hope. It would be interesting to watch those sequences next to each other to see how even the way they move the camera, the way they edit the scene, feels very much like that scene that we know so well. No cantina band here. It's very quiet there. We see one of the aliens who's playing sabacc, but that's about all. And then he gets paid for his bounties. Doesn't want to have the Imperial credits because, well, the Empire is no longer. And then he gets paid in calamari flan. Now, of course, the calamari is for, it's a trap! And the currency even sounds wet if you go back and he puts the coins or whatever it is on the table. You hear like these slushy sounds. A really, really cool little detail. And so apparently after the Empire went down, the calamari, being a very reputable race, very reliable, very noble, their currency became very important to replace the Imperial credits. The calamari, I think, were also a race that was very good at building ships and stuff like that. It's been a long time since I read those novels from the expanded universe. But anyway, makes sense that if they're very much in trade and selling ships, then they also have a strong currency. We then get introduced to the concept of a guild of the bounty hunters. So apparently the bounty hunters, even though they're kind of like in the gray zone, they do have their code of their codes of conduct and their arrangements. And so one bounty hunter cannot get all the bounties out there and all the quests. It needs to be kind of, it's like taxi drivers, you know. They always have to wait in turn for the next customer, and you can't just grab a customer. At least in Amsterdam, it's like that. Everyone gets his turn. That's why you are a member of the taxi cab company or whatever it is. So everybody gets a chance. Then we get introduced to the ultimate quest. This, of course, is going to be the life-changing quest. And it was about time that something happened that would really impact the story. Of course, in storytelling, you need to have these moments where everything changes. What he's been doing so far was just regular work. He's been doing this forever. But now he gets challenged to do something out of his comfort zone, something that no one has ever succeeded in doing. And of course, he, being the hero of the story, he will have to give it a try. And that'll change his life and change the story and make it interesting, of course. So this whole job is kind of off the record. This, by the way, the first character is a quest giver, but it's, again, just like with the Guardians earlier on, there's going to be a second person, the real quest giver. He gets a choice. Do you want it or not? And initially he's like, okay, I'll do it. And then he rings the bell, and it's apparently this whole planet, everybody seems to speak Huttese in this part of the universe. You get this eye that comes out and and it sounds very much like the doorbell that the Hutts had on Tatooine. So I guess it's probably Amazon. I don't know. It's just one of the recommended brands in the universe of Star Wars. The door opens and we get to see another fantastic cameo. Of course, Gonk. Gonk, gonk, gonk. And it's a newer model because I think he's got this transparent upper part of his encasing. I don't know what's in there, but it was so cool. And of course, every Star Wars fan cheered and applauded. Another door opens. There are a lot of doors here that open. Every door is also a symbolic threshold to a new part of the quest. And there are very dirty, rusty looking Stormtroopers, like this one, but much dirtier. And that shows you, that tells us that parts of the Empire survived, or at least the troopers are still there. So that's another way to tell us, hey, we're going to see more of the familiar, nemesis that you used to know from the original trilogy. So it's really, and I thought it was really cool to see the classic Stormtroopers again, instead of the ones that we see in the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. We get introduced to the real quest giver and to his second assistant, who turns out to be this doctor. This has these round glasses. Classic Nazi stereotype. This is a camp doctor who wants to experiment, cruelly probably, on living creatures. And so the acid that he is asked to retrieve is probably going to be fodder for this doctor. So you immediately understand this is not just a regular bounty quest. This must be a creature that is very valuable to these guys from, remnants of the Empire. And there's probably something that they can discover by dissecting it or something like that, or by experimenting on it. So that's the first hint that we get at, this is probably going to be a very, very major character. The doctor probably is, but also his victim. And of course, a lot of the Empire, the way the Empire was depicted in the original trilogy was very much inspired by the Nazis. Dr. Pershing is his name. A little bit clumsy, also kind of a stereotype. We again hear about Beskar, and there is a slab of this very valuable metal that he is offered as a reward, and then there will be an entire container of that stuff waiting for him if he succeeds. This Beskar is apparently metal that belonged to the Mandalorians, and they hint at something dramatic. They call it the Grand Purge. That's revealed later on by the armorer. And so that may be one of the reasons that the Mandalorian actually accepts this mission. He first wants to walk away, also classic in storytelling, in mythology. First there is refusal of the quest, and then there is finally acceptance of the quest. We then see the marketplace. There's this very cool little cameo of the Kowakian monkey lizards. I had to read that from my notes. Of course, Salacious B. Crumb, the court jester of Jabba the Hutt, was one of those creatures, and here they're roasted on an open fire. Nice for Christmas or Thanksgiving. We hear some more Huttese, and then he walks into another room. This is kind of the Mandalorian camp or base, and we see this skull of a mythosaur. It's this creature. I don't know. It's maybe in olden days the Mandalorians used to ride these mythical creatures, and that is also instantly recognizable for Star Wars fans because Boba Fett had this as an insignia. But now we learn that was actually a creature probably very fierce, very dangerous, that was used as a horse or something like that by the Mandalorians. Then we get to the Forge. And this is another very clearly mythological moment. The Forge itself looks like a sanctuary. You enter through a narrow door, it's kind of dark there, and then the Forge itself almost looks like an altar with candles burning, you know? And then you see the armorer, the smith, who is, you know, with a hammer clanking on metal, is making armor. This comes straight from Greek mythology. Hephaestus, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, was like a divine armorer who forged, for instance, the helmet of Hermes, the one with the wings. Also made the, I think, the armor of Achilles, that made Achilles almost invincible, except for the heel, you know. And so this is an important story element because it's revealed to us that the armor of the Mandalorian is made of Beskar steel. The Great Purge may have been, I don't know, the persecution of the Mandalorians, maybe by the Empire, because there's an Imperial logo on the slab of Beskar, on the steel. Maybe the Mandalorians were purged by the Emperor, or in ordered by the Emperor for the steel, just to, you know, take their very precious steel, almost sacred material. And then the armorer is wearing this very, you know, it looks like a Greek helmet or something like that. Hephaestus in Greek mythology was deformed, so maybe this character, played by a woman, also has a deformed face, and maybe that's the reason why she's wearing a helmet. Or maybe it's just because all the Mandalorians just like wearing helmets. I don't know. And then he gets a new piece of his armor, and we learn that this is part of an initiation ritual. So the Mandalorian is still being initiated. He's asked, has your what was it, the signet yet been revealed? And he says, no, not yet. So he's not ready with the initiation process. And bit by bit, he gets more pieces of the armor. That hints at a culture almost like a religious culture. Things first need to be revealed. You need to be induced into the next phase of your initiation. And then the tribal drums that you hear in this part of the story in the background kind of reinforce this religious connotation. And it hints at the pretty complex culture of the Mandalorians. Now we get flashbacks to his traumatic youth. We learn that he's a foundling, so he's an orphan, like Moses and some other mythological heroes. He has no parents, no lineage, he's alone. His identity is a mystery. He has no family, but maybe that will change. Has to do with the end of the episode, of course. And then we get to a third planet. It's a desert planet. Looks a little bit like, you know, parts of Tatooine. And he's attacked by another monster. It's a blurg. Looks like a giant tadpole, a little bit more violent. The music is kind of not very good there. The blurgs were actually introduced in 1985 in a movie that is still missing on Disney+, The Battle for Endor. And then the blurgs also were seen in a couple of Clone Wars episodes, but this is the first time since 1985 that we're seeing them back in, you know, in a real life episode or series. Really like that sequence where he's attacked, almost gets killed by one of those blurgs, and he's saved by a mysterious helper, an Ugnaught. Queel is his name. An Ugnaught, like the ones that we see in Cloud City on Bespin. Very cool to see these aliens here again. And the prosthetics, I have to say, were very impressive. Much, much better than in Empire Strikes Back. I have spoken. That's already a classic line, and I see it on Twitter and everywhere. I have spoken. Something tells me that we're going to see this guy in future episodes as well. He's great. And again, he's a quest giver. And he says, many have tried and failed. this is classic fairy tale material. It's like all the knights before the knight in shining armor have failed to defeat the dragon. So now it's up to you to try it again. And this time, maybe this time, he will vanquish the danger or the dragon or whatever it is. Then a Wild West trope. He needs to learn how to ride a horse. In this case, it's a blurg. And it's exactly like, every cowboy has to learn how to tame a horse, also part of your initiation. He easily wants to give up. It's like, just, give me a speeder or something like that. And then he's reminded by Quill of his provenance, of his noble heritage. I think this is an important moment. He realizes, hey, I need to honor the tradition from which I come. And so I need to do this. I need to learn this. Because he learns his forefathers used to ride these mythosaurs. So, what's a little blurg for you? The initiation scene is great. Reminded me a lot of the flying dragons in the movie Avatar. It's exactly the same thing. You need to approach it carefully, touch it, or like what we see with Harry Potter in, is it the second movie? Or the second book? Where he has to ride the winged beast, and then they learn how to approach them, touch the snout, bow down, be very careful, and then you can ride it. Again, tropes, but I'm not complaining because it just adds to the kind of the classic nature of this story. So he learns how to ride a blurg. We then get, I think it's the first wipe that we see, the classic Star Wars wipe from below to the upper part of the screen. Very, very cool. Maybe there may have been another wipe that I didn't notice earlier on in the episode. The Mandalorian adheres to his code. The guide deserves a reward. The guide refuses, and he's like, so why do you help if it's not for the money? He has yet to learn that some people are motivated by other things than bounties, than rewards. So apparently his friend is motivated because he sees the Mandalorian as a peace bringer. There's history there at work. He uses his telescope from his rifle, of course, totally outnumbered, as it should be for the knight in shining armor. He discovers the bounty droid, IG-11. I love the way they kind of explain the clunky look of the bounty droid in Empire Strikes Back. Of course, that was just a prop, couldn't even move. And now, he's like this murdering machine. Very, very well done. And then, of course, he's a bit like C-3PO, super formal, even more formal than C-3PO. There's a lot of funny interaction between the two during the fight. This whole fight feels like a Western, the people that shoot from the rooftops, etc. The big metal door that we see sets us up for, this formidable foe, this end boss. Must be a huge monster if it needs so much protection and so many guards. What creature is this going to be? And of course, it's going to be totally different from what they're setting up here. By the way, the banter between IG-11 and the Mandalorian made me think so much of the banter between Han and Chewie when they're fighting Stormtroopers. And also the relation between Han and C-3PO from time to time. So Han very condescending towards C-3PO, and here the Mandalorian clearly sees IG-11 as inferior to him as a member of the bounty hunter guild. But I loved the kind of the feel of the dialogue and how much it resembled Han and Chewie. Unfortunately, IG-11 is not going to survive the episode. I wish he had, because he was great. The CGI, by the way, of the droid is amazing. I mean, you totally believe that he's right there in the scene, but it is CGI. Then there's another door that needs to be opened, like a safe this time in a heist, and they used a big cannon to open it up, only to reveal, after one last, enemy that gets shot, an egg. An egg as a symbol of new life, of something unexpected, something that will be born into this world. And they open the egg, and that's the big shocker of the episode. We see a creature that looks just like a baby version of Yoda. And everybody there is melting. It's like, oh, so cute. wait, 50 years old? Oh, of course, Yoda used to be hundreds of years old. So, what's 50 years for a Yoda baby? We then get a scene that reminds me of the scene in E.T., the touching of the fingers. It's very well filmed. And IG-11 clearly has a termination order. So what's the deal there? Who sent IG-11 on this mission at the same time as the Mandalorian? It must be someone else. What's going on here? That's probably going to be revealed in future episodes. However, the big question is, what is this creature? Is this a baby version? Is this just a creature from the same race of Yoda? Here's my theory. What if this actually is Yoda? How is this possible? Well, think of the kind of archetype that Yoda represents. He's a teacher. He is almost like he's like a guru, like Buddha, or like the Dalai Lama, And the Dalai Lama, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that tradition, is reincarnated every generation. And if the existing Dalai Lama dies, then these monks go and search the world for his success, for his reincarnation. It's not just succession, it's the reincarnation. What if Yoda will resurrect, or no, resurrection is a Christian term. In this case, that this will be a reincarnation of Yoda. And we'll get to see Yoda grow and turn into the Yoda that we know and love. How amazing would that be? I mean, it could be a little bit like Groot, Groot seems to be defeated, but there is a little bit of him left, and that grows into a tiny little baby Groot. Maybe this is little baby Yoda. I mean, but that would explain why the Empire is so afraid of him. And there's, well, if you can't catch him alive, then, killing would be fine too. And that may be also the reason why this doctor is so interested, because if this is truly a reincarnation of Yoda, he's still, very weak. It's just a baby. So maybe they can find out what the source is of the Force, or I don't know. All sorts of things are possible. So many possibilities. I'd love to know your thoughts about the reveal. Spoilers galore in the comments. I don't mind, because I gave this a warning. If you've not seen this series, you shouldn't be watching this right now. So let's talk. Let's speculate in the comments. I want to hear what I missed. I want to hear your thoughts, your theories, and of course, I'll be reading all your comments. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back in a couple of days when the next episode is going to premiere on Disney+. I'm Father Roderick signing off. God bless, and may the Force be with you.